Hey everyone, welcome back to another video. In this one, I'm taking a look at Wong since he finally got an upgrade and is no longer just a leadership for Alliance Conquest to fight those pesky physical type teams. For those that didn't do Alliance Conquest, he basically had no use at all, but that is not the case now since his uniform not only provides him a support passive, he still has that great leadership, but now applies to specific characters that have the magic tag, even though it was mislabeled as the mystic tag in the patch notes and possibly in game too. But not only that, he can also stand alone in PvP as well as PvE. Getting right into it, the first test that I did was a stage 99 of Thanos, just at T2 to see what his skills 1 through 5 can do, and the difference that his ultimate makes. The build that I'm running across all my PvE tests is with a CTP of Insight, since I had that before, but he basically just gets the attack stat boost from it, since I have an Insight on my other characters, and the damage proc I get from them as well, meaning the damage proc that I have from the Insight is basically negated. What I'm trying to say is that he has no damage proc. Not only that, but I actually forgot to run an ISO 8 set and Urus on him, so the performance that you see is basically an empty build. With that said, being able to take down a stage 99 with no build and no T3 with over a minute remaining is actually pretty impressive. The thing that was really surprising to me during my testing is that I was able to take down a Proxima in almost under a minute. The reason that that is surprising is again because I don't have a damage proc, I don't have a build, and he doesn't have a T3. But on top of that, he doesn't have any all defense down that ignores immunity in his kit. So that means that just the raw damage and the buffs that he gets from his skills 1 through 5 is enough for him to clear these stages so quickly. When you're able to T3 him, the stat bump that he gets is pretty good. He goes up about 12 to 13,000 physical damage, and his HP jumps up about 38 to almost 40,000 depending on your build. I'd say that's a pretty good stat bump considering it's above average for speed types. If these results have you interested to try him in PvE, the build that I would recommend would be either a CTP of Energy or a CTP of Destruction. You could also run a CTP of Rage because he does have that 40% guaranteed crit rate in his kit. The reason that I recommend an Energy or Destruction first is because he is very proc friendly. Most of his skills can be pretty much instantly cancelled, meaning that you don't run the risk of missing the proc on these skills that you want. With the ultimate skill available and the stat bump, I'm able to complete the same stage a minute faster. The Proxima stage, on the other hand, I complete almost 20 seconds faster, but that's largely due to the fact that I completed it so quickly, so you can't really see how much the T3 is helping him. His ultimate ability is pretty plain, but if he did have all defense down that ignored immunity on it, or even in his kit anywhere, I wouldn't be surprised if he could one-shot Proxima. Obviously, to get a better idea of that improvement and his overall base damage and performance, I have to take him into World Boss Legend, and by using a suboptimal team being Chavez's leadership and his own support passive to himself, I'm able to complete the stage in about 2 minutes and 30 seconds. Keep in mind that for Doctor Strange, I was able to complete it in about 2 minutes and 48 seconds, I believe. So the fact that I can complete it in 2 minutes and 30 seconds with Wong with no build should give you an idea of just how good he is. If you're curious to the rotation that I was using with Wong, I did a 3, cancel 5, cancel 4, and then you would just use the 1 and 2 as filler till your skills are back off cooldown. The fourth skill is the one that you want to proc on, since you want to open with the third skill considering that it gives you that massive 1.5 times damage accumulation for damage dealt, and then the fifth skill can also be instant cancelled and gives you that additional 15% damage increase across all of your skills. When you have the ultimate skill unlocked, you would put it in after the fifth skill, and that can also be instantly cancelled. So the rotation would be 3, cancel 5, cancel 6, cancel 4, and that is the skill that you want to proc on. And then again, you do the 1 and 2 as filler to get your ultimate up faster. If you notice in the clip, I'm able to complete stage 19 with about 30 seconds remaining, which isn't too impressive, but you have to keep in mind what I keep mentioning over and over, that this is with no build that I'm able to do this. Again, he has no ISO 8 set or even ISOs at all, no Urus, no artifact, and no damage proc. If I actually had any of this stuff equipped, I might have been able to complete it with about 1 minute or more remaining, and if I had damage proc, it would probably go up to 2 minutes remaining, if not more than that. Now, I can't say if he'll have any value in ABX, since it's a little bit too early to tell, but I did take him into the no restrictions, using characters for the speed hero restriction day. Unfortunately, he doesn't have silence in his kit. He only has paralysis, so you can only really use him for the paralysis season. With that in mind, I had to swap him out, so the score that I got is a little bit lower than it should have been, but I was still able to hit that 8 million mark. Just keep in mind that at this point in time, I actually had built the character up, so I had the ISO 8 sets, Urus, and even his artifact, and I had swapped out his insight for a CTP of greed. So he did kind of have a damage proc, but with an actual damage proc like a destruction, energy, or rage, he should be able to hit much higher. But with so many good speed types in the speed hero category, it's difficult to say whether he'll overtake any of them and be easier to cap at that 12 million mark. Either way, the results you see here should give you something to think about. On the PvP side, when I first saw the patch notes, I thought that the character would be primarily for PvP, considering that he has an iframe ignore counter in his kit, healing, and his leadership gives him that damage immunity to all allies that have the mystic or actually the magic tag. The reason that I'm prefacing with this is because he is good in PvE, but in PvP he is inconsistent. He isn't bad per se, but he has one massive glaring issue, that the AI prioritizes the second skill, which you would think isn't really that bad since it has the iframe ignore counter and 50% penetration to all sources. But the issue is that the skill has such a low cooldown that the AI basically just does this one skill on repeat unless the character is interrupted. And even then, if the character is interrupted, he will go into the fifth skill, but then just go back into the cycle of using the second skill. The other issue with the second skill is that the animation is fairly long. So if the opponent has an iframe ignore, they can either knock you out of it or you can end up dying before ever going into the counter portion of the skill that does good damage and has that super guard break on it. This is really unfortunate considering that that third has the high damage accumulation on it and the healing, and the fourth skill gives him a 100% damage increase to that skill, which can essentially one-shot characters. That's the main reason why I'm kind of complaining, since as you can see from the clips, he's obviously not bad and he's pretty good actually, considering that he can take out all of these top metas using just one skill. I just find it a bit frustrating because I can see from his kit that he has the potential to be much better if the cooldown on the second skill was a bit higher or the animation was a bit faster. I was initially going to recommend using a CTP of regen on him due to the health pool increase on his stat bump, but he never really does his healing. You could go with the regen, but you just have to keep in mind that you won't really benefit from the healing on his third skill, and you'll basically just heal off of the proc from the shield. So alternatively, you could go with the CTP of authority to get that invincible and the damage accumulation increase, and if you are able to reforge it, you can also get the steel effect, which synergizes with his uniform having 30% on it. However, the main drawback for this is that he already has crit damage passively in his kit, so the crit damage from the CTP of authority will largely be useless. With that said, and keeping in mind that he basically just does the second skill, which is a long iframe, I actually opted to go for a damage proc on him. And all the PvP testing that you're seeing right now is actually with a mighty CTP of greed that has the ambush effect. The reason that I went with this is because I'm actually benefiting from using his own leadership that gives me some damage immunity, so I'm able to survive a good amount of time, allowing for that ambush effect to fill up. The other reason going for a damage proc is because, like I said, he mainly just does his second skill, so I'd rather have the character take out the opponent as quickly as he could with a damage proc than trying to survive as long as I can for the potential T3 or something, considering that the character won't really be able to take out top metas, especially with defensive supports, without a damage proc. To add to this, the ambush effect from the CTP of greed synergizes fairly well with Wong, since he gets that super guard break immunity when he's in his second skill, allowing him to not get knocked out and cast the full skill to deal the damage and super guard break on the second skill to the opponent. On top of this, the CTP of Greed also provides him with a little bit of extra healing, and it doesn't really contradict the penetration that he gets from his second skill, which is 50% to all sources. However, if you wanted to run a CTP of Destruction, you could potentially also do that, since that penetration buff is only up for 3 seconds. Meaning that if the character gets knocked out of his regular AI rotation, you can benefit from that penetration across other skills. If you've noticed in these last 2 clips, I'm actually playing the character manually, just to give you an idea of how good Wong could be if the AI actually rotated through more of his skills. If you wanted to play the character manually in PvP, all you really have to do is just integrate the 3rd skill into the 2nd skill spam, and then if you get knocked out of the 2nd skill, you basically just spam the 5th and the 4th skill. The 4th skill with the 3rd skill damage accumulation has such high damage on it that you can basically one-shot any character in the game. Now, if you're still skeptical about how well a Greed could work in Alliance Conquest, where there's multiple characters attacking you at one time, I was lucky enough to get at least 1 test in before making this video, and as you can see from this clip, Wong comes up huge and ends up soloing the entire Hela Thanos set by himself. You obviously won't always get this kind of performance from him, and if you're running a damage proc, it's advisable to use his leadership in order to give him more survival. So as you saw from the testing, the character is not only a support for things like World Boss Legend and for characters like Doctor Strange, he is a really good standalone character both in PvE and PvP. For those Alliance Conquest players that are wondering what team to use him on, the one that I suspect will be the top pick for him will probably be his own leadership with Dormammu and either Doctor Strange as a lower level team or Warlock as a slightly higher level team. Dormammu will likely get the most benefit from Wong's leadership since he has that reflect, and the longer that you can keep him alive, the bigger of an issue he is for your opponents. That concludes the video for Wong. The next one that I'm going to be looking at is America Chavez, and you'll be surprised to see just how amazing she is in PvP. You know the spiel. If you liked the video, please consider liking, subscribing, and sharing with your friends. And as always, thank you for your time in watching, but the video is now over.